Okay, zone coverage. So I'm gonna make this a little bit simpler, but this is a sophisticated way to do zone coverage, but I'm gonna simplify it. So let's start off with our middle linebacker here, and we'll just work with him for now, okay? And then we can talk about the rest later. So the middle linebacker is gonna have one of three coverage zones underneath, okay? So those three are hook, curl, flat. Okay, so regardless of which linebacker it is, they're either in the hook, the curl, the flat, or some combination of those. All right, so now let's define hook as over number 3. We'll define curl as inside number 2, and we'll say flat is outside number 2. Okay, so these serve as the most useful definitions for these three zones: the hook over number 3, the curl inside number 2, the flat outside number 2. Okay, what does it mean to be number 3 or number 2 or inside or outside? So I'm gonna actually scratch this guy out for a second. So when we have receivers on the field, I'm just gonna represent these with X's. Regardless of how they're spread out or how they're formed, I guess, you always count outside to in. All right, 1, 2, 3. That's the middle, so we go 1, 2. So we have 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, and on every play, with the exception of some trick plays or like tricky formations, you will always have 5 eligible receivers, and they'll be numbered 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, just like that. Okay, so the hook, before the play starts, the hook right now is directly over number 3. There it is. Okay, the curl is inside number 2, as we said. All right, and the flat extends to the sideline, is outside number 2. Okay, so once the play starts, these guys don't stay static. They move all around, right? So if the number 2 receiver runs in and the number 3 receiver runs out to that same side, then at the moment they cross paths horizontally on the field, so at this point here for the number 3 receiver and number 2 receivers, they switch who they are. This guy becomes number 3 now, and this guy becomes number 2 now. So as a linebacker, you have to be watching where your progression is going and anticipating what could be coming back, okay? So at any given point on a play, I should be able to stop the video and see that the hook player is directly over number 3, meaning even with him horizontally on the field, but still with 10 to 12 yards of depth, or whatever your coach or whatever your system calls for. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the page. All right, whenever you're stuck and you're not exactly sure what your coverage responsibilities are, there's an easy way to figure it out, okay? So we say cover what, right? So obviously cover 0 and cover 1 are main coverages, so those don't count. But cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, those are your basic ones, okay? This number here, after the word cover, tells you how many guys are deep. So what that means is in cover 2, we have 2 deep players, all right? If we only have 2 deep players, then the field can only be divided up in half. So each deep player would have a half of the deep part of the field. In cover 3, there would be deep thirds because there would be 3 players. And in cover 4, you'd have deep quarters, okay? You take this number, cover 2, 3, 4, okay? We subtract this number from the number 7 on regular down. So that means we're not blitzing, this is just regular coverage, okay? So we would say in cover 2, for example, let's just just make another list down here. So 2, all right, that means there are 5 guys underneath. Okay, if there are 3 deep, that means there are 4 guys underneath. And if there are 4 deep, that means there are 3 guys underneath. All right. So that's a total of 7 always, okay? Because you got 4 pass rushers. So now if we take these numbers, these are the underneath cover guys, the number of underneath cover guys when these coverages are called, all right? Then all we have to do to figure out which zone we have is divide the field up into this many segments. So in cover 2, that means we have 5 players for the underneath coverage. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Okay, these 5 guys have underneath parts of the field. Well, I already said that the field is the underneath part of the field coverage zone, so that 5 to 12 yards roughly will be divided up into flats, curls, and hooks. Okay, so for the sake of this, we'll say that there are 2 hooks, 1 on either side of number 3. There are 2 curls, 1 on either side of the field, and 2 flats, 1 on either side of the field. Okay, so if there are 5 guys and 6 zones, that means everybody gets 1 zone except for the Mike linebacker, who has both hooks. Okay, so the 5 guys for 6 underneath zones. All right, so now in cover 3, there are only 4 guys underneath, so you got to get rid of one of these guys. So if there are 6 underneath zones, 6 under, okay, and now we have only 4 guys divided by 4 players, 4 defenders. That means that each defender has 1.5 zones. So you may have heard, I have hook curl, or I have curl flat. That means that your primary responsibility is the first of those words. So if I'm the curl flat defender, I'm first the curl player, and then I become the flat player only when the play dictates that. Okay, so if I didn't know what my coverage zone was and somebody said it's cover 4, and I'm one of the 3 underneath players, and I know there are 6 zones, then each of us is going to have 2 zones. Okay, he'll have flat, curl flat, and he'll have curl flat. So that just leaves hook, hook for the mic. Okay, so when in doubt, subtract the number of the coverage from 7, okay, minus number of coverage, and that's going to equal underneath zone defenders. You take that number of underneath zone defenders, all right, and you divide it by 6, or you divide it into 6. So 6 divided by the underneath equals how many, the number of zones each defender is responsible for. The end.